South Africa began heading to the polls earlier today as the Rainbow Nation celebrates 20 years of democracy. Correspondents say voting has begun smoothly despite long queues, and there is an air of excitement, especially amongst the first-time voters. In fact, 25 million registered voters were expected to go to the polls, the first since Nelson Mandela died in December and the fifth in 2 decades. Election updates say there are about 97 people arrested for election-related crimes, and that is according to the police. Welcome to South Africa Decides. I'm Olukayode, Alayande. ANC party leader Jacob Zuma and opposition Democratic Alliance party chief had this to say after casting their votes.
Pull up a
An
chair for
elderly
his
lady,
wife.
Ayanda.
Well, I meant that because there was, what is that?
It feels good that I've just voted, and I hope that all voters will cast their votes free without any problem, because this is our right that we fought for. Among the rights that we have is one of the most important rights, to vote for your government. And I hope all people will do so, because it is absolutely important. My wish is that throughout the country, the voting must be as peaceful as it is supposed to be. So I'm very happy that this short but very challenging elections, we have come to this date, 7th of May.
So loud cheers here from the large media contingent that had gathered to see
To them, look at our policies. Our policies are about growth that brings jobs to the poor. Kasasa and the ANC talk a lot about the employed. There's only one party that has policies that will really benefit the unemployed, and that is the Democratic Alliance. And this is all of the propaganda of the past, because it's the only argument the ANC has left. Every single policy proposal of the DA is designed and aligned to create jobs for people who don't have them. And therefore the DA is the party of the really poor.
Thanks for staying with us. If there is one thing South Africans agree on, it is that the country today is a far better place than the apartheid years. Many make reference to the fruits of freedom with a democratic dispensation and, of course, a constitution to be proud of. Others believe that there were instances of lost opportunities along the way. On South Africa Decides today, we have Bjorn Shomi, a political analyst. We will also have TVC News' Jody Jacobs, our correspondent covering Southern Africa live via satellite from Johannesburg. I'll start with you in the studio. During the campaign, the ANC said it had a good account to give of what it has done. Do you think that's right?
Oh yes, the ANC obviously should be proud of what it has achieved. Don't forget, in 1994, there were so many predictions of the economy will nosedive, insecurity will break out, the likelihood of civil war between the Inkatha Buthelezi-led party and the ANC supporters, that is black-on-black violence in war form. There are so many nasty predictions which given the leadership of Mandela and subsequent leaderships, they've been able to nip in the bud. In addition to that, then you only need to go to South Africa today, you see huge improvement in infrastructural facilities. Is it the roads you want to talk about? Or they have delivered water to millions of South African people, particularly the black community, which had no water under apartheid.
But I beg to differ that a lot of South Africans, especially those that we have spoken to and that we have, those who have seen, who have spoken to other media houses, still feel that the ANC has not done enough for them.
Yes, they're not saying they have not done anything. For instance, if you look at the province of Gauteng, where overnight two polling booths, some polling booths were actually burned down in protest that government has not done enough for them. I mean, you have places like Gauteng province and some other places where people still feel, dissatisfied. But the truth of the matter is, overall, when you take South Africa from where it was in 1994 and look at South Africa, in 2014, you are likely going to come out and say, look, they have done very well. It's not only, even in the areas of security, they've been able to avert all that. When you talk about houses, huge mass housing schemes have been built for the black people. Yes, not enough. Yes, not enough, but it's quite a lot of investment that went into it. In the areas of health, you have even antiretroviral drugs being dispensed free, including by the unions. It's gone beyond even the health service. They've developed their own primary healthcare system in a way that even, employers do dispensed antiretroviral drugs, to ordinary people. There are drawbacks. The drawbacks are just in the areas of corruption, particularly Jacob Zuma being mad in the scandal, which he denied, of $20 million being used to revamp his house, as claimed by the watchdog. He has since denied that. But the fact of the matter is, his support base is huge. The ANC support base is huge. Many people even interpreted this to mean perks of office, rather than seeing it as corruption.
I'll come back to you. Let's take our reporter who's standing by now in Johannesburg, South Africa, Jody Jacobs, who has been... We've heard certain reports since the last time we spoke to you, especially according to the police, more than 90 people have been arrested for election-related crimes. What is this all about?
Well, election-related crimes, can vary from different things. People who transgress the boundary lines of a voting station, people who force their way into these election centers, trying to campaign inside these voting stations. People who try and disrupt the voting process in its entirety can also be arrested according to the electoral laws. The police have not been very forthcoming in terms of the exact details around these arrests. All that they've said is that more than 90 people, as you said, have in fact been arrested for these election-related crimes.
Mentioned earlier, the last time we spoke with you, that arsonists torched some polling centers overnight. Have voters been able to cast their ballots in those places?
Yes, the IEC was very swift to move in on that situation, including the South African Police Force as well as the National Defence Force, really. Police, working hand in hand here with the IEC to make sure that these elections go on without any hitches or any glitches for that matter. And so while those voting stations, that were temporary ones, might I add, had been torched overnight in the area, in certain areas, the IEC moved in very quickly, refurbished those voting stations, replenished them with the necessary stationery and voting materials. And according to the IEC, 100% of the voting stations are actually now open and people are in fact voting. Now I must add something very quickly, is that we've now transversed the entire Johannesburg CBD and across every quarter of Johannesburg. We are now in Soweto at the Morris Isaacson High School. Very important high school, really. Was really part of the June 1976 uprising here in Soweto when we saw those school kids that were murdered. But on arriving here and at many other polling stations across Soweto, we are seeing that the queues have now thinned out. And according to the IEC, who had just had a media briefing a short while ago, they say that the majority of voters are actually in the urban areas and that a lot of them have moved there, and they're seeing a high number of voter turnout in those urban areas, the more suburban, affluent areas of Johannesburg. In some instances, they've even had to send more ballot papers and more stationery to these voting stations because they've actually run out. Now, there are two reasons for this, possibly. That in the last 5 years, many people had moved out of townships like Soweto to these urban areas in across Johannesburg, or that people are not voting and at the voting station where they were actually registered. That's according to law. They can do that though, but then it puts strain on other voting stations across Johannesburg. But nonetheless, we're getting a very positive feedback from the Independent Electoral Commission on this, saying that the voting stations will in fact close at 9 p.m. South African time, but whoever is in the queue will still be able to vote.
Also like to know how political parties themselves are reacting to these reports that we're hearing. Are they satisfied with the way the election is being conducted as it's going?
We've not heard any major disputes just yet from political parties. There have been minor ones here and there about party agents at these voting stations that are complaining about presiding officers who are not able to do their work. There have been reports of IEC officials who are not capably trained to actually do this. But according to the IEC, this has been really sporadic, and it's been a very small percentage of this. And political parties, I think, have a lot of faith in the IEC. I mean, the IEC in South Africa has a very good track record. From 1994 up until the last election, they haven't really had any major issues. And so I think that these political parties will probably wait until voting stations have closed at 9 p.m. tonight and the counting officially then begins, and get feedback from their party agents across the country, and then we will probably see these disputes being lodged. Never before in the history of South African elections have we actually seen major disputes being lodged with the IEC with regards to results. It's always been really minor issues with regards to voting that has not been tallied up properly, or somebody that had wrote a digit on a result slip incorrectly, and those types of things. So we'll have to wait and see till about 9 o'clock to actually hear what the political parties really have to say, and that we're obviously going to find out at the National Results Centre, where we are moving to after this.
All right, just a quick one from you before I let you go. I would like to know, did you vote today, or you're one of those who were in that special group that voted yesterday?
I was waiting for that question to pop up, you know, and even though my busy schedule, I've been on air for most of the day, I can in fact show you the proof that I actually voted. I actually took the time out to go out and vote. I must say though that, as I think most South Africans my age, I was somewhat of an undecided voter and really only made my choice of who I'm going to cross my X next to when I actually got into that polling station and actually was handed my 2 ballot papers. But in fact, I did vote, and I think it is important that we vote. And just this morning, I spoke to the 75-year-old woman out in Alexandra who said something very poignant. Said that so many people her age and older had died for South Africans like me and many others to actually have the opportunity to go out and vote. And it is our responsibility to actually, even though some of us feel, some South Africans feel disillusioned with the African National Congress, but we must still go out and make our mark next to a political party because of all the sacrifices that had been made so many years ago for South Africans to in fact be afforded the opportunity to vote in a democratic South Africa.
Thank you very much. I wouldn't ask you who you voted for, but I'll hold the line. We'll be coming back to you after this break. But For the viewers, you're watching TVC News special coverage on South Africa's national elections. We'll go on a short break now, and the show continues in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. As South Africans decide on who should be their leader for the next 5 years, many are exercising their rights, knowing that the country is one of the top 5 most unequally yoked societies in the world today. We still have TVC News' Jody Jacobs standing by on the line from Johannesburg. Jody, we hear that young voters, I mean, you also mentioned that before I let you go on break, the free bonds saying ahead of the polls that they won't be participating in the ballot. How much difference on the field today have you seen from the statement they made before the votings?
It's been a real mixed bag of voters that we've seen out across these voting stations, especially as we transversed the city of Johannesburg. Really, in the early mornings, we saw a lot of older voters coming out to vote, people who had been there since 4 a.m. in the morning as they waited with bated breath for that 7 o'clock opening of voting stations. But then as we moved along, we saw a lot of younger voters also coming out to make their mark. We spoke to a few who had come out to vote for the very first time. And while many political parties had played on this particular issue of these born-free generation kids who are going out to vote for the first time during this election, they don't really make up that big a chunk of the voting population in South Africa. Many political parties see them really as an important part of these elections, because they believe that they could possibly be the turning point of this election. But I think at this stage we really need to wait for the statistics. The statistics will really give us a clearer picture as to how many of these born-frees have actually come out to vote in this election, especially since so much had been made about them leading up to these polls.
Thank you, Jody Jacobs. I can see that the night is falling where you are right now. Do stay out of trouble and ensure you take care of yourself. We've been speaking with Jody Jacobs, reporting for TVC News from Soweto. And back to the studio now. I still have Mr. Biodun Shomi, a political analyst, join us to talk about the South African elections. Before the elections, quite a lot of people were not satisfied with the ANC. But we know they might win this election. Going forward, how can they remedy this?
Oh yeah, it depends on how you view it and who you are talking to. With ANC veterans, some of who actually called for people to spoil their ballot instead of voting for ANC, for them, they resented the idea of ANC actually moving to the center. You know, they felt ANC is now neoliberal. And when you speak to the working class, particularly the middle class, they probably want ANC to continue, to be a neoliberal party. And of course, there has been disquiet between the ANC itself from his allies, COSATU. We know Numasa actually pulled out, of ANC. We also know that National Union of Mine Workers and so many other allies, South African Communist Party, are disquiet. They seem to feel dissatisfied with the way ANC, with the direction ANC is going. That is why people like John Melema, who used to be the leader of the Youth Vanguard, today now leads what they call Economic Freedom Fighters, which is a political party in South Africa today. But the key issues are around provision of meeting the needs of the people. They're around the issue of the control and ownership of the industries in South Africa, of the economy of South Africa. There are issues around whether the industry should be nationalized, the economy, the commanding heights of the economy nationalized, and then wealth redistributed or not. And the ANC position to tread, in the middle, that yes, we need a mix of both. Why we need to intensify, private capital development within the country. At the same time, we need to see how we can use this, redistribute wealth to the people. But it's not doing enough. ANC is not doing enough, partly because maybe they don't have the resources to do enough at the same time of everything. But I think the major issue is ideological. It's about the control of the economy. Don't forget how ANC came about, all the illusions surrounding, once we all are able to vote, ANC is in power, everybody will have houses, everybody will have water, we have good roads, we have jobs. But the concern in South Africa today, particularly also for the free bonds, they're particularly around government services, infrastructure, housing, health, employment. People are worried when they graduate, they won't have jobs. Those are the issues. But can you really hold ANC strictly responsible for that? Don't forget, we are just emerging from a global economic recession. So if one takes a balanced viewpoint, would you say ANC should be going, reversing, should be moving towards the left completely, or stay at the center to embrace all? That is the issue. So whether ANC needs to do something differently, I think what they need to do differently is to tackle graft, to tackle corruption. That is what they need to do, and tackle crime within the society, so that even when you have the wealth is better distributed, to the people. But a situation where we're asking ANC to nationalize industries or to move to the past, I don't think that is the correct way to go.
Let's hope for the sake of the people of South Africa that the ANC maximizes this 5th term in office to answer the questions on the lips of most South Africans. In case it doesn't, do you see the parties springing up, springing a surprise in the next elections in terms of coming together, forming a stronger alliance against the ANC?
I think that question is best answered, after this election, whether they will come together against the ANC, because different tendencies, people who are dissatisfied with the ANC today, veterans of the struggle, anti-apartheid struggle, are either calling on people not to vote. They embark on the spoil your ballot paper campaign. Then you also have others like Melema, who used to head the youth wing, who has now formed his own party. You have others who are drifting to different political parties, some South African Communist Party, then you have the Massa and some other labor unions thinking of forming a different political party. Today, what people are waiting for is to see the results of this election. Last election, 5 years ago, ANC fell short of having 70% to be able to change the constitution, which is also necessary to meet the needs of those rural dwellers. They didn't get it. If ANC should score less than 63% in this election, I think many people will feel that ANC is declining. And then there's the need to address some of these issues. So you might have to find ANC trying to form a new rebel coalition with other opposition parties, after the election. That is, trying to look at their direction and then see how they can get a mix in a way that would reduce the opposition to ANC. But I think the benchmark is 63%. If they score 60% or below, they are likely going to have, a new coalition. More people will ask questions about the direction of the party, the leadership, and what do we need to do. But if ANC should score more than that, don't forget that they've done something which they didn't do in past election, which is to allow people who are resident outside South Africa, South Africans resident outside South Africa, to vote. So that could also change the equation. We don't know until when we see the result. Then that will determine what needs to happen, whether ANC needs to look at itself, look at its direction, and how do we, create a party that is more encompassing, or whether ANC is going on the right direction. I think 63% or below is the benchmark.
I'm afraid this the much time will permit us to do on the program today. Biodun Shomi, thank you very much for joining us. Now, thank you for coming.
It's my pleasure.
The sun is gradually setting. The mood is getting tense. Citizens wait with bated breath to find out who will be the next president. By now, the guests should be reducing the size, with many heading back home after exercising their right to vote. Amidst unemployment, inequality and insecurity, citizens only hope for a much more advanced South Africa in the next 5 years. On that note, it's a wrap on South Africa Decides today. Until we meet you again, perhaps in the next 5 years, when South Africans will again go to the polls. I am Olukayode Alayande. Thanks for staying with us.